over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Good evening and welcome back as always. Let me first say I'm wearing this shirt because Sunday, the maestro will be 88 years old. He's playing this weekend at Birdland in New York. So if y'all get a chance, go to the Village, check out the brilliant Ron Carter. White House budget calls for $163 billion in federal cuts next year. The White House released a partial budget proposal today calling for $163 billion in cuts to federal spending in the next fiscal year, pushing reductions to health care, education, and many other government programs while boosting spending on defense and alleged homeland security. In 2026, proposed Trump tax cuts could result in a significant reduction in revenue, potentially totaling $4.6 trillion with a T over the next 10 years, with an annual cost of around $466 billion with a B. So you want to cut an estimated $466 billion in revenue or income and cut $163 billion in expenditures. You know what, folks? I need a brighter and greater mind than mine to help me with this math. Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historical context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is the $163 billion in requested cuts amount to nearly 23% of the known budget. They would come from a portion of federal outlays known as non-defense discretionary spending, such as child care, education programs, climate assistance, funding for functions, and even for other government functions, and even through, though they say Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid are not on their radar, don't trust and always verify. My guest is Professor of Economics Emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he taught economics from 1973 to 2008. He is currently a visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs of the New School University in New York. And he also founded Democracy at Work in 2012 as a means to promote the idea of moving beyond capitalism through the transformation of the workplace. Professor Richard Wolff, as always, welcome back.
Leon, you are a pleasure to listen to and to watch, and it is an honor for me to be part of your program.
You are too kind, sir. I greatly appreciate that, and it's guests like you that make the program what it is. Before we get to the economics of this, there's a story at CNN and other sources I want to just quickly hit on, and that is J.D. Vance says the war in Ukraine, quote, not going to end anytime soon. Hours after the United States signs the minerals deal with Kiev. And if you all were listening to this show yesterday, I said, I wonder if Trump's signing this Ukraine minerals deal will be the justification for the U.S. escalating the conflict in Ukraine. Well, I think we have our answer. How does one go from, I will end the conflict within 24 hours of taking office, this is a really simple problem to solve, to, it's going to be up to them, Ukraine and Russia, to come to an agreement and stop this brutal conflict. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to end anytime soon. Of course, the Ukrainians, are angry that they were invaded, but we're going to continue to lose thousands and thousands of soldiers over a few miles of territory this or that way. I hope both of them come to their senses. How can the Ukrainians, be angry that they were invaded when they were the U.S. proxy in starting the fight? That's my opinion. Professor Wolff, don't know if you want to weigh in or we just move straight to the economic conversation.
Well, I think if I could say one thing, how you lay it out makes perfect sense. But there is also another possibility, and that is that Mr. Trump really had only in mind to be able to say to the American people he got something, to sort of cover over the failure to end the war in a day and all the other things he promised to do to bring that war to an end. He obviously can't do it. We are more than 100 days into his regime, and he's not one iota closer to ending that war than he was the day he took office. So he has to have something. And so now he has something. We have a deal to be able to get at maybe some of the things that maybe are under the soil, maybe over there. I want to remind people, a good part of what they think might be there is under soil that the Russians now occupy and are hardly likely to turn over, neither to the United States nor to Mr. Zelensky in the Ukraine. And here's an alternative. He may still do the other thing he said, walk away and blame Russia on the one hand and Ukraine and Europeans on the other for not being willing to do the great peace plan he can pretend he offered them. In other words, make it he got some minerals and they're the bad guys who didn't end the war. And so then the war will continue and he won't have to, in fact, fund it. He'll give them a little, he'll do a little of this and that, but he'll, in fact, cut back drastically on the amount of financial and military support he gives. And why would he do it? Here's the other image, because then it's crystal clear what's going to happen. Namely, the Russians will complete their victory. The Ukrainians will be gone as a separate nation. Whatever is left of them, the Russians will determine. Mr. Zelensky will be out of the picture, and there'll be very, very little left. And the United States will negotiate with Russia whatever agreements the two of them were, in fact, talking about over the last few weeks. Only now, neither the Europeans nor Mr. Zelensky will be in a position to make problems for them. In my judgment, that is just as likely where this is going as the one you offered, which I agree is also a likely outcropping for Mr. Trump. In either way, he will wave this vague minerals nonsense as if it was something, and meanwhile try to limit the damage to the American budget and to the American reputation. He does not admit it, but I read the foreign press every day, and around the world, here's what's being understood. The United States committed itself to fight the Russians with the Ukrainians and all the Europeans, and that would win. The way President Biden said it at the beginning, We'll bring Russia to its knees. The
Mhm.
ruble will collapse. Mr. Putin will be gone. I want to remind Americans, all of our leaders said it. None of it happened. It is complete make-believe, and the rest of the world is drawing an inference. The United States is not the power and is not in the position of power that it used to be. And everybody is adjusting their plans, their strategies, their business models, you name it, to take that into account. And an ongoing war, which the United States and Europe will continue to lose, as they have over the last 3 years, is only going to make that impression stronger.
I hadn't planned to go down this path, but I do have one question to you regarding this conflict, and that is, why are the Europeans still so hell-bent in pursuing, I'm not going to call it a losing effort, I will call it a lost effort, because in my humble opinion, and based upon those I've talked to, the war is already lost, even though it has not ended. Why would Europe want to continue a conflict in its backyard? And I'll make one more point and then let you answer the question. I remember very clearly, this was almost maybe almost 2.5 years ago, when President Macron went and met with Putin, and they were sitting at this very, very long table, very, very long table. Right. And Putin said to Macron, if you continue siding with the United States on an invasion of Russia, I will send a missile into Paris. And Macron looked at him like somebody had pooped in his soup. It was like, oh God, no, please do not. It was like my dad looking over his paper saying, son, I'm about to have a different kind of conversation with you. And so I don't do help me understand where's the upside for Europe here?
Okay.
Other than operating as a vassal of the United States, what's the upside?
It's a wonderful question. It's the right question to ask. Here, as best I can do, is the answer. Every major leader in Europe at this point, Starmer in England, Macron in France, Meloni in Italy, wherever you go, with one or two exceptions, but the overwhelming bulk of the leaders of Europe have been politically active people for many decades. Over those decades, their position, they're usually called the center right, or maybe the center of politics. They have been the champions of being the loyal allies, I'm being polite here, subordinate allies of the United States.
I call them battles.
They express every day how they have Western values, whatever the hell that means. They are all full of celebration of America, and it runs deep, It's why young people in Europe for 50 years have thought it was very chic to wear blue jeans, blah, 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 take American music and all of it. That's who they are. And they have presented themselves to the public as vote for us. We've got the good connections with the big, tough Americans. And by voting for us, we're in good graces with the United States, and they're the big player in the empire. Coming out of World War II, we were the big player in the empire. So it all hung together. That meant they had to join in the Cold War. The Soviet Union is evil. All of that is terrible. They did all that. That was what the Americans wanted. That's what they gave them. Every now and then, one of them wouldn't do that enough. The Americans pushed them out of office or helped do it. We know those stories.
Mhm.
Okay. Now something happened that freaked them out. And that's the Trump presidency number one. The
Okay.
Trump presidency number one, because there was the clear message from the Trump people that they don't give a crap about Europe. They don't care. We don't need you. You're a burden. We don't want to pay for your defense anymore. We really don't care what happens to you. And if you have a problem with the Russians, it's your problem. It's not our problem. We don't. They couldn't believe it. They are like the loyal subordinate who's always said yes to the big shot, and now the big shot leaves him out there dangling in the wind with no place to go.
Mm-hmm.
They thought it was an aberration. They welcomed the return of Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
They knew him. He was a reliable, old-style politician, cold warrior, just what they were used to and they liked. And he said he would undo it all. They watched in horror as the 4 years of Biden didn't do anything, didn't change anything, and looked, which it turned out to be, the way in which Mr. Trump could come back even more determined than he had been. They hoped that he had maybe changed, but within days of his winning that election, they understood they were in deep trouble. And here's their trouble, just so everybody gets it. Their trouble was illustrated to them 3 days ago by the election in Canada.
Hmm.
In that election, the candidate who had been leading in the polls by double-digit numbers, the gentleman from the French-speaking part of Canada, Poilievre by name,
Mm-hmm.
he was overwhelmingly defeated by Mr. Carney,
Mm-hmm.
who, to make a long story short, had one idea in his campaign, and that was to give the middle finger to Mr. Trump. That was his campaign. That's what he rallied the Canadian people, and they voted him in overwhelmingly. Well, that's the nightmare of Mr. Starmer, of Mr. Macron in France, and fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
And the politicians lining up to bury them are already fighting each other for who gets the chance to do that. But here's the problem. The reaction of Starmer and Macron, of the whole European establishment to the disaster they're looking in the face, has been to say to their people, we are going to show you that we are reliably anti-Trump. We can't denounce him directly because he can really hurt us between now and whenever our next election is, and that varies from country to country.
Mm-hmm.
We can't attack him directly, but we can show that we are not what we always have been, his toadies. And you know how we're going to do it? We're going to be hard on Ukraine. We're going to become anti-Russian way beyond what the Americans ever did. We're going to demonize Mr. Putin like he's got horns coming out of the back of his head. Like he is the worst thing. The Russians are the worst thing. We're the great seller. And we're going to say how bad Mr. Trump is on just at that point. Now, he's a wonderful man, blah, 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 blah. But on that point, we are the big anti-Trump. That's their hope. That's their strategic position. And by the way, it's based on their desperation. This is not some calmly arrived at. They've had meetings up the wazoo for the last few months, and that's what they've come up with. That's their shared strategy. That's why you see the extreme sentences by Starmer and Macron. They were actually proposing to send British and French troops
Mm-hmm.
into Ukraine until Mr. Putin said, the minute they
Yep.
set foot in Ukraine, I will blow them away. And since the Russian army is 10 times the combined military of France and Britain, that would be as unequal a battle as the one between Russia and Ukraine has been all along. And so they can't do it. But they're going to substitute verbal political theater of love Zelensky, love everything Ukrainian, in order to show that they are not the toadies. But it's not going to work because the people in those countries have watched them be the subordinate lickspittles of the United States for 40 years, and you can't shake that even with this kind of theater.
Well, not only did he say, I will blow them away, he also said, I will consider this to be a direct assault on my country and will deal with you accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
As in, I will send a missile into Paris. So
well, Wilmer, the really interesting thing in the long run is look how things have changed. The United States can't do what it used to be able to do. It can't do it. And our leaders don't talk about it. They can't admit it. They can't face it. They can't talk about it. So they have to come up with one stupid strategy after another. What did you think the Russians would do if you hit them with sanctions during the Ukraine war and said you won't buy their oil, you won't buy their gas? We'll bring them to their knees. The biggest, remember that? The biggest sanction program the world has ever seen.
We're going to turn the ruble into rubble.
Exactly. And all they did, I'll make a long story short, they sold the oil and gas to Russia, to China and India. Problem solved. Why they didn't think of it? What's the matter with you? What do you think the BRICS alliance is for? Now you see in action. And yet they call, here's their mistake, they call what they're doing to China now another Cold War. Hey, Jack, you can't do to China what you did to the Soviet Union. That worked then. It doesn't work now. The Soviet Union had nowhere to go to solve its problems. China has fixed that. They learned that lesson.
They have the world.
That's right.
We are the world.
Yeah.
Anyway, oh boy. Well, thank you for that clarity. So now getting back to the economics, the domestic issues. So in 2026, for 2026, the proposed Trump tax cuts could result in a significant reduction in revenue, potentially totaling $4.6 trillion over 10 years with an annual cost of around $466 billion. I don't understand the math, Professor Wolff. Help me out.
No, there is no way to help you out. The math makes no sense.
Oh, so it's not me. Okay.
No. That's one of the reasons Mr. Trump, Americans have to learn this. They haven't learned it yet. One of the logics of Mr. Trump making sure he's on the evening news literally every day, having some, extreme remark capture everybody's attention, is because he can't sell the nonsense of his policies to do that. Look at it. Let me give you an example right off the top.
Mm-hmm.
Every poll that I've read indicates that one of the key reasons he got elected was because of the upset in the American countryside about the inflation we had in 2021, 2022 under Biden. He was able to pin it on Biden in the same way that the out candidate always blames the in candidate for whatever goes wrong. So we watched all that. Putting a tariff on everybody is a way to boost another inflation. There really is very little confusion. Tariffs are a tax. And if you're adding a tax to the cost of everything, like a sales tax, well, then when you go into the store and you buy a blouse and you pay a sales tax on top of the price of the blouse, well, then the cost to you is more because they added the tax to the price of the item. That's what tariffs do. They do it to everything that comes in from outside. I try to explain to people, if you, like me, had a cup of coffee this morning and you put sugar in it and it was put in a paper cup, the coffee, the sugar, and the cup are all imports. And you're going to be paying $20 for your latte very soon. So get used to it. It's an inflation. On the other hand, if you put a tariff, you use that approach, you're making everybody in the world, every country in the world that sells anything in the US, look for other customers because the conditions in the US are lousy. You have to pay this tariff, which you didn't before. So instead of selling here, where people are going to buy fewer of your goods because of the tariff tacked on them, you're going to look for customers elsewhere, which means we're not going to be doing as well. That's why the Wall Street Journal and the Bank of America and Goldman Sachs are all predicting a recession later this year or early next year. And if you have a recession together with the inflation that comes from the tariff, we call that the combination of stagnant economy and rising prices, called stagflation. Now, Mr. Trump, that's what his policies are pointing to. Could something magical happen so it doesn't work out like that? Yes, that's always possible. But if you're a normal betting person, he is self-destructing, and therefore he has to keep attention away. Otherwise, people like you will do the arithmetic, see the logic, and go, what in the world is this crazy man doing? Well, he's stuck. His constituency wants there to be all the things he's trying to do at once. That doesn't work, and he's stuck. What's he going to do?
Two things. One, or maybe three things. Larry Hooks asks, Professor Wolff, how is that working out for the 77 million idiots who put this ignorant ass back in the Oval Office? Before you answer that, let me say this. In looking at the town halls that the Speaker of the House
Johnson, right?
Has asked his conference not to conduct, and you hear a lot of folks, and these are to a great degree, I know it's happening all over the country, but to a great degree, with Midwestern white people saying, wait a minute, I didn't vote for this. And Larry, this is tied to your question. I didn't vote for this. This is not what I voted for. What I hear them saying in that is, because you did vote for it, folks. There's no question about that. What they're saying is, wait a minute, Mike Johnson, and you weren't supposed to do this to me.
Right.
That's what I hear when they say, I didn't vote for this. They're saying, wait a minute, my wife wasn't supposed to lose her job at the Veterans Administration. My daughter was 2 days away from her year-long period before she was made permanent in her position at the Department of Education. So your thoughts, Professor Wolff?
Well, I think what you're seeing, for example, in the foregrounding of this deportation, where the ICE is going around snatching people out of their jobs or out of their homes, or when they're shopping at the store, and putting them on a plane to Louisiana or to that prison in El Salvador or any of that. That's the drama. That's the evening news. That's supposed to tell the people who voted for him, see, I am doing the horrible things to these bad people. Look how he has to manufacture a criminal record for that poor guy that he threw out of the country who had no record. You know, how desperate he had to get to do that. That was the cover, but that was always the cover. You know, bad-mouthing and scapegoating the immigrants was a cheap shot. I'm an economist. I had to go around the country, and I've been doing that, explaining to people. We are an economy of 330 million people, one of the richer economies of the world. There is no way on God's green earth that 10 million of the poorest people, the undocumented immigrants, are an explanation for the economic difficulties of a nation of 330 million. That's just ridiculous. That's like saying that the elephant who really looks sick, and the explanation is the ant over there that he mistakenly stepped on. You know, wait a minute. That's nuts. Meanwhile, what Mr. Trump did is he used that as a cover. We got himself elected, and now he's doing the real business. And the real business is, let me put it this way and put on my hat as an economist. In recent years, the United States has borrowed more money than it ever did before. Our budget deficits each year are now counted in the trillions with a T every year. Why? Because our strange capitalist system works as follows. You got corporations and the rich, and you have the rest of us. The corporations and the rich say to the politicians, don't you dare tax us, or we will give our money to whoever's running against you. So, that's over. So for a while, they shifted the taxes onto the rest of us, those of us who aren't employers, those of us who aren't corporate executives, until we said, too, you put more taxes on us, we will vote against you. The Republican Party, remember, was the party of no tax, anti-tax, cut that, no tax. That's the only message they really had. And so the politicians got to the point, how are they going to deliver to the corporations and the rich all the services they want? And how are they going to deliver to us all the services we want? Healthcare, education, Medicare, Medicaid, all of it. The answer is borrow. The only way the politician can not tax us and still give us is by borrowing the money. And now, if I can get this across, it will be an achievement. Now, people, stay with me here. Who does the government borrow from? It's one thing to say they borrow, but who? They can't come to you and me, because unless I don't know you real well, Wilmer Leon, you don't have money to give to the government. I sure as hell don't have any myself, so they're not going to bother coming to knock on my door. I don't got nothing. Where do they go? They go to corporations and the rich. And why is it that corporations and the rich have money to lend to the government? Here we go. Because the government didn't tax them. This is a hustle. This is as big a hustle as the guy who sells you a Gucci watch for $11. You know something just happened to you, and you look at this watch, which probably will stop working within the next 15 minutes, right? So, but they also borrow from other countries. And 2 Mondays ago, something happened. The number one country that the American government borrows from is Japan. And the number two country is the People's Republic of China. The Japanese, not the Chinese, the Japanese told the Americans, and their Minister of Economy repeated it yesterday. We now consider the U.S. Treasury securities we own, because that's what they have when you lend money to the government. It's a card we can play in these negotiations. I can see you nodding over the tariff. They're letting Mr. Trump know, you push us on the tariff, Jack, and you're not going to get a nickel from us. Worse, we're going to unload. And the Chinese in the last 3 years have unloaded $200 billion worth of it. So the United States isn't in the position it was. It's got to do something about the budget. Meanwhile, he has to keep somebody happy, the military, because if this country keeps dissolving the way it is, if the differences within this country blow up the way they are, then the military will decide. That's what happens in every other country, and we shouldn't be so naive to imagine it ain't going to happen here. And we have an army that isn't the old army either. Now half the army is female and non-white, and you better be really careful what you do and how you do it. This kind of problem has hit other countries. It's just we are now like other countries. We're not the top of the hill, and that's because the empire isn't there anymore, and that's what nobody is willing to talk about. And I find myself screeching, look, folks, it's like the emperor's new clothes. That emperor ain't got no clothes. This is a situation where we ought to be talking about how the United States is going to accommodate the end of its empire. Otherwise, we're going to end up in the same pathetic situation that, for example, Britain is in. Britain has become what it once was, a small, poor, cold island off the mainland of Europe. That's what it is. And to imagine we somehow will never is childish. It's just childish. And it's costing us terrible mistakes like the one in Ukraine. And Mr. Trump has no solution.
No.
Yeah, he's going to cut spending. So he comes in with that Musk character and fires tens of thousands of people. That's not had nothing to do with efficiency. I've done efficiency studies in my life. It takes time. It takes a lot of attention. You have to examine a workplace or whatever it is, and then go over the different possibilities and write some suggestions. You don't go in and wholesale fire. That's childish. It's got nothing to do with efficiency. He has to tell the story, because what he's trying to do is cut spending. And he's doing it in the classic serve the rich people way. Cut all the programs that working people have fought for the last 75 years and build up the defense and build up ICE. And you know where the bulk of the money goes for? It goes to the big corporations that make most of the stuff for the Defense Department, and the big corporations that fly the airplanes full of the deportees and the companies that run those camps where they interrogate them. I mean, Jesus Christ, you have to shake your head at the naivete of Americans. And your questionnaire is quite right. What in the world are his base, the good people among them, who thought they were getting something new and better and different, and what they're getting is very old Republican Party politics in a vaguely new dress, hustled by a vaguely new barker, but it's the same old story. Only now it's a country that's in desperate trouble. When empires decline, here's something we've all noted when we do the history. When empires decline, the people who were the richest and most powerful in the empire are in the best positions to hold on to the wealth and power they got in that empire. And when it goes down, they hold on, which means the rest of us, all the costs of the declining empire are offloaded onto us. When they stop taking care of our health through the CDC, or they stop helping the schools through the education department, that's what's going on. They are making all of us pay for what the empire can't deliver anymore, and they're holding on to their share, and Mr. Trump is their agent to do that.
And a part of that also is neoliberalism, because they sell it to the private sector and use tax dollars to pay for it, and you wind up with worse services This whole idea, thank you, Bill Clinton, reinventing government as we know it. That was a failed effort. Because you can't run government like a private sector business, because private sector business is in the business for profit, and government is in the business of providing service. So
exactly.
Those are two different missions. So you can't go ahead.
No. I'm just nodding in agreement. We keep forgetting this lesson, having to learn it over and over again, and then somehow not retaining it. I mean, look what we are doing.
And how are we? So even if the reinventing government as we know it scam could actually work, you're actually going to turn it over to a businessman that filed for bankruptcy 6 times? He bankrupted a casino.
Yeah.
How in the hell do you do that?
And by the way, look at the lesson he learned. You can be bankrupt 6 times. You can blow away a casino. You can demonstrate. What was he selling? Steaks for a while. That went nowhere. He ran a university. That went bankrupt. I mean, he learned, though, if you talk endlessly, if you're a showman, if you, before people can figure out the latest scam, you got a new one down the pike that makes everybody wonder. You can become the president of the United States. And he's not going to change, because when we make all these criticisms, all of which are correct, he's going to smile and look at us, you and me, and say, yeah, but I'm the president, you're not.
And the adage, and you know this better than I, the adage is, if you owe the bank $1 million, the bank owns you. If you owe the bank $100 million, you own the bank.
Yes.
Which is why he has said a number of times, not only does he say, I love he says, I love the uneducated, but he also says, I love debt, because his whole empire has been created out of leveraging debt.
Yeah.
And people have to understand that's his mindset. On this tariff piece, the reporting was, I think, Wednesday, that Amazon was going to post on their website the price of the tariff that was associated with the product you were about to purchase.
Absolutely.
And then somehow Jeff Bezos gets a phone call from the White House saying, are you out of your mind? You can't do that. But Professor Wolff, I thought Donald Trump told me, he might have told you too, I thought he told me the tariffs were a beautiful thing. Yes. I thought he told us the tariffs were going to be wonderful. Well, if they're so lovely and wonderful, why don't you want anybody to see them, Professor Wolff?
Well, you know the answer, right? We all know the answer. What Jeffrey Bezos was doing, and I can't imagine he wasn't aware of what he was doing, was saying, since he hates these tariffs, since they make everything Amazon does much more difficult, it'll reduce the purchase of goods because of the higher prices, and that will hurt Amazon. Amazon makes its money by distributing the package with the goods Americans buy, and they're not going to buy. All the signs show it. They're going to have a rough year. So is every other retailer. And he knew he was trying to help defer the anger that will come from the American people, some of which will be anger against Amazon, because they're going to see that the price of what they bought last year from Amazon for $10 is $12 or $15 now. And they're going to be upset. And he doesn't want, like all sellers, he doesn't want the anger of an upset buyer to be directed at him. It's just a situation of avoiding the bad news. He wants to shift it on to Mr. Trump. And Mr. Trump says, wait a minute, I want to shift it on to you. I don't want you to do that. That will make everybody aware of what the tariff does to them. I've been busy telling them that the tariff is a way of hitting China. No, it isn't. It's a way of hitting Americans with higher prices. This is the last thing he can afford to be told to the American people. Every spokesperson he has, which include economists that I know personally, are carefully choreographed never to say what the financial press is now full of, namely the likely inflationary consequences of these tariffs. And so you have a disconnect. The Wall Street Journal will tell it to the people who don't matter politically, and the rest of the mass media will make sure that it doesn't get out there, just the way the White House made sure he changes what's on the ticket and what's on the little receipt you get if you use Amazon.
Sean Atkins says, my cream honey I order on Amazon is I think that's $1 more. It was $10 now. Oh, now it's 11. He's saying it's gone up $1.
Right.
And Kevin Baptiste, thank you so much for that super sticker. Dr. Wolff, could you give some guidance on how to best explain this murderous hegemonic capitalistic system to friends and family? Oftentimes they aren't feeling a brother. They aren't feeling him. So how do you explain this murderous hegemonic capitalistic system?
Look, it comes out of our history. It's not I'm not going to point you to this scapegoat or that scapegoat. It's part of our culture. It's part of our history. But remember, every system that the world has ever seen, for thousands of years, that human beings have lived in a variety of economic systems, in the village system, in the what we call the tributary system, in slave systems, in feudalism. Every one of those systems arose and then it faded away. Capitalism is just the latest one. It arose. We've had it for several centuries. And let me tell you, the next scheduled event is it fades away. It's not a question of whether, and it's not a question of how. It's really only a question of when. And here's the kicker. It may be now. Can I assure you of that? No, I don't predict the future any better than anybody else can, which is to say, not at all. But we are seeing, in even your question, you are aware that this system has serious, profound failures and flaws. And the more people see that, the more those people begin to act with that understanding, the sooner we will get on to something better. One of the reasons we don't have slavery anymore is because the slaves understood that you could have a better system than masters and slaves. Just like the serfs understood you could have a better system than lords and serfs. And I can assure you that more and more people in capitalism are coming to the understanding there is better than employer-employee. But as long as we let this be, if we let a small number of people, the board of directors, the owner of the business, be the ones who make all the decisions, including whether or not we have a job and income, the more we're going to have the kinds of problems we have. If we believe in democracy with a little d, as I do, and as I think most of you do, then you have to ask yourself this basic question. Why are workplaces not democratic? If we think we ought to vote for the mayor because the mayor has power over us in the community where we live, why is it we don't think we ought to have power over the CEO who makes even more important decisions over us? Whether I have a job, what kind of job I have, whether it's safe to do the work I do, whether I will have enough time for my family, et cetera, et cetera. Why don't we make workplaces democratic? We should have from the beginning. We never did. And that, I would argue, is the root of our problem.
Let me combine two stories to the point you made about numbers and data being carefully choreographed. One is the jobs report that came out that the employers added 177,000 jobs in April, reported as a solid showing amid tariff uncertainty. I think some of that data was collected at a time that does not reflect reality in the month of April, as we have found ourselves involved in this on again, off again tariff regime. And the other point is Donald Trump threatening this idea of being able to fire federal workers, invoking Schedule F to make it easier to fire thousands of federal workers, making them at-will employees. And there are those that believe that if that happens, that many, for example, the economists at the Department of Labor will be more concerned about their jobs than they are about reflecting the data as the data demonstrates, and hence carefully choreographing the numbers so that they don't reflect how bad Donald Trump's economies really are. I may have combined some things that don't need to be combined, but your thoughts, Professor Wolff. First of all, starting with the April jobs numbers.
Yeah, here's a situation. Tariffs are nothing new. Tariffs have been around for hundreds of years. Governments use them when they need them, when they're in trouble, when they have some particular objective. So we have a lot of knowledge, literature. The libraries are full of books and articles that lay that out. So we know that tariffs take time to have their effect. Businesses don't make a decision today because there's a tariff suddenly. Mr. Trump dumped these tariffs very short time ago, basically in April, and suddenly the world has had, a few weeks, and companies have to make enormous decisions of where to invest their money, where to move their product out of a warehouse onto a ship or not onto a ship to this port or that. All of that takes time. And we're not going to know the effects of all of that for some months still to come. We have an early set of effects, but if you'll notice, alongside of the numbers for April, there were adjustments for earlier months, and mostly those were down, less jobs than they had originally said. So what you're seeing, it's like a slow motion movie. When they're showing the train heading down the track, right aimed at the stone wall, but it's not the normal speed. It's going slowly, and all of us are screaming to the people on the train, get off, get off, get off. You're going to hit a wall. We're in that position now, telling the American people, oh boy, are you in trouble now for what's coming down the pike, for what these strange people are doing here at the top of the system. But they are desperate. For 40 years, we've been told free trade, globalization, isn't it wonderful? Our companies are going to China and we will all be blessed by having cheaper goods because they're more cheaper to produce over there. No one said, yeah, that's the good news. The bad news is all the jobs that won't be here anymore. All the towns collapse, the factories that are empty, the communities, the stores that won't have enough customer. None of that was explained to people. And so here we are at the end of the 40 years. We're giving up on globalization. The Chinese have outmaneuvered us anyway. So we're turning in nationalism. We're all going to do it ourselves. Well, I got news for you. It's too late. You made the decisions. It was profit that drove you to leave. Now you want to turn around and undo it. But meanwhile, other people have figured out how to produce what you produce, only better. And if you come back to the United States and you have to pay American wages, you're back to square one. That's why you left in the first place. And one of their answers, if you get to hard-nosed ones, is, yeah, but we're going to bring the wages in America down to where it's as cheap as producing in China. And if you want something to worry about at night, worry about that.
There was a can you give me a couple more minutes?
I can give you exactly 5.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll take exactly 5 to this question. I sent you a piece about hyperinflation, and
Right.
it was a piece from December, but looking at the projection of the impact of hyperinflation on a number of quote unquote underdeveloped countries. How do you see that impacting? How do you see these tariffs, or do you see these tariffs exacerbating that situation? And does that move across the oceans and find itself impacting the United States economy?
First of all, these tariffs, especially in poor countries which have been hit high in Asia, Africa, and a number of other places, for them, these tariffs can be so devastating that, yes, it could lead to hyperinflation. It depends a little bit on how the governments in those countries react to the difficulty. For example, Vietnam, Thailand, those countries in Southeast Asia there, they have become very important shippers of clothing that we here in America buy from them and we get because they produce better quality at lower price than anywhere else. But they've been hit with terribly high tariffs. If that destroys their industry, and they're very, very worried about it there, their governments may resort to printing money to cope with this. And then, yes, you would see hyperinflation.
Can you define hyperinflation for those that may not understand what it is?
There is no literal. It's when, inflation is if prices go up 1 to 10% per year. If prices go up more than 10% a year, then you start talking about mega inflation. And if it keeps going up, then at some point, which is not written in a book, it becomes hyperinflation. Let me give you an example that I can do from my family. My mother was born in Berlin, Germany. And when she was a child, she told me this as I was growing up. When she was a child, during the 1920s in Germany, she remembers her father coming home from his job at midday, around noon, and then having lunch quickly and going back to his job. He would come home with a big brown bag full of money. He would hand it to her mother, my grandma, who would take the bag, give Grandpa his sandwich, and run to the store to spend that money. And she had to do that because prices were doubling every hour. And so that bag of money, which could get dinner if you spent it at noon, wouldn't get you a quarter pound of butter if you waited till 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Right? That's a mega inflation. The German currency at that time, the Deutschmark, it was called, you had to have, at the height of that inflation, instead of 6 of them to $1, which you had early in the 1920s, by late 1923, you needed 6 million Deutschmark for $1. That's hyperinflation. But it happened in an advanced industrial country like Germany. But they had a crisis. They lost World War I, and then they were stuck with a reparations payment that they had to give to France and England and the United States because those were the winners in World War I and Germany was the loser. The combination of the war destruction and the reparations payment meant that the government had no way to function without printing the money it needed. So it began to do that. And when you see that situation, then a hyperinflation becomes a real possibility. And in Germany, that's what happened.
And do we run the risk of that happening here?
At this point, that risk is little. But if things keep going, and if the government keeps as unable as it has proved itself to be to deal with it, yeah, then it can become a reality here. The notion that all these things we've seen in the rest of the world can't happen here was never true, and it's becoming a very harsh lesson for us now.
Well, if the hyperinflation hits the McDonald Islands, those penguins that live on the McDonald Islands are going to be pissed.
Yes.
And I don't want to see no angry penguins.
No. They'll leave a calling card on your living room rug you don't want to think about.
Professor Wolff, thank you as always. Thank you so much for your time. Greatly, greatly appreciate that analysis. And we look forward to having you back. And I got you out on time.
Absolutely, you did. I appreciate that. And I would love to come back with you and spend some time talking. This is very, very important stuff.
Richard, thank you. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Folks, again, I got to thank Professor Richard Wolff. He's on to his next mission, whatever that may be. Thank him for joining me today. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. New episodes every week. Look forward to seeing you all on Monday. Please follow and subscribe. And remember, those of you that wait a minute, I got a super sticker another super sticker that I'm missing. ¿Dónde está la super sticker? Wait a minute, let me see what I got here, because hey, I appreciate you all so much. Oh, Carol, thank you, Carol Amsterdam. Thank you for that $5 super sticker. Greatly appreciate that, Carol. And to those of you that are watching on other platforms, please subscribe via the YouTube platform. We're close to 7,000. We're trying to get to 10, and we can't do this without you. We're here for you, but we can't do this without you. As always, thank you all so much. Greatly appreciate that. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots, because this is rhetoric-free podcasting. And I got to also reiterate, there are no tariffs associated with the contributions that you make. This is a tariff-free zone. Donald Trump be damned. With that, see y'all next week. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful, blessed weekend. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.